I'm Laura Vinroot Poole. For 20 years, I've owned Capital, an internationally recognized specialty store. Capital has never really been about fashion. It's always been about people. What we wore was created to share the meaningful journeys that inspire me. From the designers and friends I meet on the road to the men and women with whom I work each day.
Everybody wants to know her name. Who is she? Who is she? Who is she? Did you ever know someone so enchanting?
I was thrilled to sit down with actress and friend Jessica Capshaw. In our conversation, Jessica shares her journey from the challenges of breaking into television as a young actress to her profound role as Dr. Arizona Robbins on Grey's Anatomy, the first openly gay series regular on network television. I loved hearing more about the entertainment industry and how Jess navigates it so beautifully as a working mother of 4. Jessica Capshaw, I'm so excited to have you here.
I'm so happy to be here.
We met at the Country Mart, and I think you're basically the mayor of the Brentwood Country Mart.
The mayorette, the mayoress. What is the?
It's just mayor.
It's just mayor.
It's just mayor.
It's mayor.
Yeah.
I enjoy it. I enjoy the Country Mart.
But isn't it like the happiest place in the world? It's something weird about that place. It's just really happy.
It makes me very happy.
Me too.
I think I sort of feel like it happened for me, or the relationship was cemented.
Yes.
In the most durable of concretes when we bought a house, probably within walking distance, like 15-minute walk away from the mart, and I had our first child. And it's such a walkable neighborhood.
Yeah. And
when you're a new mom, you're kind of like pretty sure there's a disaster on every corner, or that you should be able to be within 5 minutes of your house.
Yeah.
If meltdowns occur, yours or theirs. And so I started going to the mart because it was so close, and it was sort of like this. And it hadn't even fully rounded out to be like the most incredible, robust place that it is now. But I would go and I would grab a coffee, and I'd be able to sit with Luke, and we would, walk and talk, and it was just sort of, it was so happy and sunny and open, and the floor plan sort of made you feel like wherever you were, there you were. You weren't super aware that there was so much more in the mart, like whatever store you're in, you really feel like you're in that individual place.
It's intimate.
Then 1 second later, you're around the corner and you've got some other world that you're walking into. And then, of course, as I had another child, it became the place that they were so familiar with.
Yeah.
That, I always sort of say, truly, at 12, 9, 7, and 3, if I drop them off at the front door and I said, like, okay, go grab some breakfast, and then can you do me a couple errands,
and then go to the shoe repair,
100% be able to come back and say, like, meet me at this spot, and they would have met me at that spot. They would have had, seen a couple friends, had a good time, gotten their stuff done. So it's like a big warm hug.
Tell me where you're from.
I was born in Columbia, Missouri. And my mom and my dad had met at Mizzou, the University of Missouri. They were both teachers. My mom was born in Texas originally, but then she moved to Missouri and sort of lived in Ferguson County, that Florissant area. Mm-hmm. And my dad had been raised in a place called Chaffee, Missouri, which is about 2 hours south of St. Louis, and had been born into a family where there was no college, there was no nothing. And so my grandpa was very much like, by hook or by crook, you are going to college, and you will all
become a professor.
Yeah, you will all either be lawyers or doctors. And so I guess my father bucked a little bit of convention and decided to become a teacher. But then he met my mom, because my mom also was friends with his sisters. So there were 2 boys and 5 girls in my dad's side of the family. And my mom was just enamored by this Capshaw family. Like, oh my gosh, these, like, my aunts were all, like, super beautiful. And I mean, it's always a lesson, and, like, you never know the whole story, but they seemed super glamorous, and they seemed to have it all. And meanwhile, they were, born to parents who had nothing. Yeah. And it was so not some sort of, like, fluent wealth or anything like that. It was not generational. It was all sort of brand new.
And what did they teach, your mom and your dad?
My mom taught basically what was called special ed.
My mom did that too.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And my mom was, and still is, just a beautiful person inside and out. There was like one girl from 2 towns over that went to New York City and ended up landing herself on the cover of 17 magazine. Huh. And of course, as soon as someone that you actually know has done something, it actually becomes possible.
It's called an expander. We talk about it all the time. It is.
Yes.
It just opens your mind to realizing that you could do it.
That it's even possible.
Yeah.
But that it's even an open, available thing.
I love that.
And so a bunch of her friends were said, Kathy, you should go to New York City and you should see if you could be a model. And so Kathy had Bobby take some pictures in the backyard that are still in existence and quite
beautiful.
Amazing. And he took some pictures of her in the backyard, and then
Kathy's very glamorous.
Kathy's very glamorous.
She's very beautiful.
Kathy's very glamorous. They went to New York City. My mom, the story goes that my mom and dad walked into Eileen Ford's modeling agency and had an appointment with her, I guess. And with the pictures my dad had taken, she signed her, and then they just decided to move to New York.
Wow.
Which is wild.
That is wild.
It's wild. So she was she had me when she was 22, and I was about 2 or 3.
So you went with her?
Yeah.
Okay.
We all went.
And before we get to New York, how do you think Missouri formed you as a person?
Having been born there, I think that there's just sort of an innate identity that is rooted there. Mm-hmm. And then thankfully, my parents, not to skip ahead, but my parents got divorced.
Yeah.
And so when you're a young woman growing up with single parents, I think your gender sort of on some level very much contributes to who you have the most, not affinity, but ease with.
Right.
And so that was my mom.
Yeah.
And so my dad was sort of, a guy. And it was, again, sort of like a shared custody thing, but I wasn't with him all the time. And so there's this like little speed bump that you have with being able to like really identify with being with the parent who's the opposite gender and that you don't see all that often and everything else. And because he was so strongly tethered to his identity of being from Missouri and being from a big family, we would spend most of the time that we had together back there, which was amazing for me because I had 5 aunts and I had my cousins. So I ended up being in Missouri a lot. So
and I bet those aunts were crazy about you.
Crazy about me. And by the way, it was like I was like a a very strange, elaborate, and infinitely sympathetic character in that like no one had gotten divorced.
Right.
So I was like this, poor little Jessie.
Right.
And so and I did not milk it, I swear, but I really did. Now that I look back on it, I just got treated like I was, everything was like, what can we do for you?
Yeah.
You poor little child. So I spent a ton of time with my grandma and my aunts. And then when my mom started working as an actress, there were like one of her first movies, she had to go to Chicago and she was going to be working, probably 12, 16-hour days. And I again, for the reasons I just outlined, I think I didn't want to stay in New York City with my dad full time. And so my grandma took me. So I went to Missouri and I lived in Chaffee with her for, and it seemed like I was there for a year, but I think looking back on it, it was probably like 2.5 months, something like that. But again, it was just sort of like who I was.
Your mother is still so Missouri also.
She is, I know.
Oh, she loves it. She talks about it.
I know.
Tell me about growing up with her. She really is so glamorous inside and out, but such a lovely person. I want to hear about her style and kind of
the evolution.
Yeah, because that's a big evolution, right?
Yeah. So my mom was just this very independent, very strong, but also very soft and very feminine and nurturing and very maternal. Fun. Like fun. We laughed so much. She always, and she still does, like loves making fun of herself, loves making fun of situations. There's not a ton of ego there, you know? Back in the day, I feel like the first style that I really remember, and definitely I remember her putting her imprint on me, was like she, in New York City in those early days, she was very Annie Hall. Mm-hmm.
She still is.
She is. Yeah, she has. She still is. She was very Annie Hall, and then Annie Hall's daughter was Vera Laura Ashley. So I was very like in the sailor dresses and the sort of like the Little House on the Prairie vibe, and the socks and I did go to a school with uniforms, so it was like I was either in like the uniform with the bobby socks and the shiny shoes and all that stuff, and the side pony, a half up side pony, or I was in the Laura Ashley.
The full Laura Ashley
Yes.
gear. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I love that. How do you think her style influenced you?
I holistically loved her, so I think that it just became such a positive imprint. Like, all the things that she wore were just lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You grew up in New York and with your family in Missouri, back and forth. And then how did you get to LA? And when did you get to LA? And I'm sure your style changed a lot at that point.
Yes, it did. It completely did. You're making me think of it, and it did. So my mom, so she had started working in film, and then it sort of was like she all of a sudden had like a very alive career.
Yeah.
And back then, a little more than even now, you would go on location, like you would go make the movie wherever the movie was meant to take place. So there was a lot of traveling, but she also had met and fallen in love with someone who lived in Los Angeles. So we moved to Los Angeles from New York.
How old were you?
At this point, I'm probably like 7.
Oh, wow.
And
what was that like? Was it scary?
I was just saying this to a friend of mine that I don't remember it being scary. I mean, I remember like I had such a strong relationship with my mom.
Yeah.
And I was so used to being around adults that I just was, I was infinitely sort of adaptable.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like when you're...
Yeah. When you're an only child too. My daughter's an only child. I think she's so comfortable around adults.
Yeah. And there weren't a lot of babysitters.
Yeah.
It was sort of like you
True,
went
it's so
where
true.
you went wherever your parents were.
Yeah.
And so I was with my mom all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I was probably more uncomfortable in circumstances where I had to
Be with a bunch of children.
kids than I was with my mom and all of her friends. But we came to Los Angeles, and I ended up going to this very progressive school up on Mulholland called Westland. That was lovely and completely like that place where you're like free to be a kid and free to be dirty and all that good stuff. I mean, it was not a traditional education in any way, shape, or form, and I definitely spent a lot of time like making adobe bricks and baklava and talking about my feelings, and that was good. You know? And at that point, I don't think that style was on my radar at all. Everything was going to get dirty, so there was no point in actually spending... No, I'm sorry. Towards the end of that, it was all about esprit.
Oh, yeah.
Esprit was big.
Esprit was so big.
Yes. Yes.